Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The air in the Forrester mansion was thick with tension, heavy enough to suffocate anyone brave or foolish, enough to linger in the same room with Ridge and Brooke that evening. It had started as a typical Thursday, with Ridge ensconced in his study, nursing a glass of scotch and a storm brewing behind his eyes, the kind only decades of heartbreak could cultivate. Brooke, meanwhile, had been flitting from room to room, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline, waiting for news she barely dared hope for. And then, as if the universe had been holding its breath for decades just for this moment, the door swung open and there she was. Their daughter. Their lost, forgotten, whispered about daughter. Someone they had both mourned and imagined in secret, and now she was standing before them in the flesh, grown, assertive, and nothing like the images they had conjured in their minds over the years. Her eyes bore into theirs a mirror of Brooke's, softened by Ridge's depth of sorrow and strength. And before anyone could speak, she took a tentative step forward, her voice trembling but steady. "I'm your daughter." The room erupted, not in cheers, not in quiet disbelief, but in raw, crashing waves of emotion that none of them were prepared for. Ridge's jaw went slack, the scotch tipped in his hand, spilling across the mahogany desk like a slow metallic waterfall. Brooke's knees nearly buckled, and she reached out instinctively, as though sheer maternal instinct could tether her to this stranger who somehow felt familiar in ways words could never capture. Every memory they had tucked away, every secret they had buried, every what if they had whispered to themselves in lonely moments suddenly collided in an emotional explosion. But just as the warmth of reunion began to take hold, a shadow loomed Taylor. Her expression was a carefully constructed mask of calm, but beneath the surface, a storm of fear, guilt, and rage raged violently. She had known this day could come, had feared it, and yet here it was, undeniable and unavoidable. Taylor's betrayal had been long in the making, a tapestry of lies, secrets, and calculated omissions that had ensnared everyone in its threads. She had been the keeper of a secret that could have shattered the Forresters years ago, and now, standing in that room with the truth finally clawing its way to the surface, there was no escape. Ridge's eyes, usually so discerning, darted between his daughter and Taylor, the weight of decades of trust and suspicion heavy on his shoulders. Brooke, torn between the mother she had longed to be to this lost child, and the woman she had loved and depended on for decades, struggled to process the enormity of what was happening. Every heartbeat in that room seemed synchronized to the rhythm of revelation, betrayal, and fragile hope, and it was only a matter of seconds before everything they thought they knew would be irrevocably altered. Their daughter, who had grown up believing in her own carefully curated story, was suddenly thrust into a reality that no one could have prepared her for. She had arrived seeking connection, truth, and perhaps revenge for years of absence, yet the warmth radiating from Ridge and Brooke was undeniable, like a lighthouse cutting through the fog of a lifetime of uncertainty. But as they reached toward her, arms outstretched and hearts vulnerable, Taylor's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her voice, usually measured and soothing, trembled as accusations began to spill forth, fragments of half-truths and manipulations that had been hidden for decades. Ridge, usually the embodiment of restraint and stoicism, could barely contain his fury. "How could you?" he demanded, each word a sharp blade slicing through the air, aimed at the woman who had once been his confidant. Brooke, caught between tears and rage, demanded answers that Taylor was either unwilling or unable to provide. It became a battle of wills, a collision of generational grief and contemporary anger. Secrets that had festered in the shadows were dragged into the light, each revelation more shocking than the last. The daughter, whose presence had initially seemed to promise healing, now found herself at the center of a maelstrom she had never anticipated. She had been raised in a world apart, isolated from the love and chaos of the Forrester family, and yet here she was, thrust into the very heart of it, where loyalties were tested, alliances formed and broken, and every glance could either comfort or wound. In the midst of the chaos, Ridge and Brooke clung to her, not just as their child, but as the tangible embodiment of the love and hope they had never allowed themselves to fully embrace. Every lie Taylor had spun now threatened to unravel that fragile new connection, and the tension crackled like electricity, promising that the fallout of this revelation would echo through the Forrester legacy for years to come. As the night deepened, emotions boiled over. Tears were shed, voices rose, and hearts were laid bare in ways that only the intense intimacy of a family drama like the Forresters could sustain. The daughter, now no longer an abstraction but flesh, blood, and history intertwined, faced the daunting task of navigating a family landscape fraught with betrayal, love, and complex dynamics she had only imagined in fleeting dreams. And as Ridge and Brooke struggled to reconcile decades of loss with the miraculous return of their child, Taylor's role in this emotional tempest became painfully clear. Her betrayal was not just a plot twist. It was a seismic event that threatened to reshape relationships, loyalties, and the very fabric of the Forrester family. By the time the sun began to rise over Los Angeles, a new chapter had begun. The past had been confronted, secrets had been exposed, and while the road ahead was uncertain, one undeniable truth remained. The Forresters would never be the same again. And in that quiet, fleeting moment between chaos and clarity, Ridge, Brooke, and their daughter found the fragile beginnings of a bond that, despite everything, had been worth the wait. A connection forged in love, tested by betrayal, and strengthened by the enduring hope that family, no matter how fractured, could ultimately survive. The moment lingered, heavy and suffocating, as Ridge, Brooke, and their daughter stared at each other across the expanse of the Forrester mansion's grand living room. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the corner felt deafening, a reminder of years lost, of time that could never be recovered. Ridge's hand remained frozen midair, as if letting go would make this moment vanish, like smoke through fingers. Brooke's eyes were wet, glistening with the reflection of chandeliers above, and though she tried to steady her breathing, it came in shallow, uneven gasps. Their daughter, tall and poised, though her hands shook faintly at her sides, looked back at them with a mixture of fear and determination. There was a quiet fierceness in her gaze, a silent declaration that she had survived her own life without them, but now she was here, demanding the recognition she deserved. Ridge was the first to find his voice, and it was quiet, almost fragile, but it carried the weight of decades of longing. You're really here," he said, his voice catching mid-word. "After all these years, I don't even know where to begin." His eyes darted to Brooke, searching for guidance, for confirmation that this wasn't some cruel hallucination. Brooke shook her head, unable to speak at first, her hand instinctively reaching toward Ridge as though holding on to him anchored her sanity. "Ridge, she's our daughter. She's really ours," she whispered, tears slipping freely now, streaking her face. The daughter's lips trembled as she stepped closer, bridging the gap of decades with each careful step. "I know it's a lot. I'm sorry for just showing up like this," she said, her voice breaking with vulnerability she had tried for so long to suppress. "But I had to know you. I had to see if the love I always imagined was real." Ridge's hands finally moved, reaching out instinctively, and she stepped into his embrace, collapsing into it like a woman exhausted from years of solitude. Brooke joined seconds later, wrapping her arms around them both, forming a circle of three that held more than just bodies. It held hope, forgiveness, and the tentative threads of trust that had waited so long to be woven. But no reunion in the Forrester family came without complication, and soon the shadows of the past crept into the room with Taylor's entrance. She had stood quietly at the threshold, her face pale but her eyes sharp, watching the emotional tableau with a growing sense of dread. She had thought herself clever, thinking she had controlled every aspect of this secret, but reality had proved otherwise. "Stop," Taylor said firmly, stepping forward, though her voice carried an unsteady tremor. "Stop this before you get ahead of yourselves. You don't understand the full story." Brooke stiffened, pulling back slightly from her daughter, and Ridge's hands tightened into fists at his sides. "Taylor," Ridge said slowly, deliberately, "I don't think I want to hear anything from you right now. You've kept this from us for decades. How could you?" His voice carried both disbelief and anger, the kind that came from having one's world turned upside down by someone you had trusted implicitly. Taylor's gaze faltered for a moment, guilt etching lines across her normally composed face. I did it to protect you. To protect the family," she said softly, though her words rang hollow against the raw emotion in the room. The daughter pulled back slightly, frowning at Taylor with the intensity of someone who had long imagined meeting this woman under very different circumstances. "Protect them?" she repeated, voice rising. Do you know what it's like to grow up believing your parents didn't want you? That you didn't exist? That your life didn't matter? Her words hit like a hammer, each syllable reverberating through the room and landing heavily on Taylor, Brooke, and Ridge alike. Brooke's eyes welled with tears, and she instinctively reached out to her daughter, gripping her hands tightly. Sweetheart, none of that was your fault. None of it, Brooke said, voice cracking. Taylor took a hesitant step forward, but Ridge's voice cut through her attempt at explanation. No, not now. Not after all this time. You owe us the truth. Every last detail, he said, his eyes dark, furious, but tinged with hurt that only someone who had lost a child could feel. Taylor swallowed hard, the weight of the years pressing down on her shoulders, and for the first time, she appeared vulnerable in a way that made everyone in the room pause. She began to speak, haltingly at first, recounting the tangled web of choices, lies, and fears that had led to this moment. Secrets long buried, decisions made out of fear and manipulation, and moments when she could have revealed the truth but chose not to. The full scope of Taylor's betrayal unfurled like a storm cloud, casting long shadows over the reunion. Ridge and Brooke listened, hearts torn between anger and relief. Every revelation was a knife in the back, yet paradoxically, it was also a key unlocking years of confusion and unanswered questions. Their daughter, who had grown up in a world that felt incomplete and hollow without them, absorbed each word, her expression shifting from shock to sorrow, and finally to a kind of resolve. She had wanted answers all her life, and now she had them, even if the truth was painful. She understood that love and betrayal were often intertwined in ways she had never imagined, and she began to realize that this was the complexity of family. Messy, heartbreaking, yet undeniably beautiful when it could survive even the worst storms. As the night deepened, emotions ebbed and flowed in unpredictable waves. Ridge found himself retreating into memory, recalling moments with Brooke before her child had been taken from them, imagining what might have been, and reconciling that with the reality now before him. Brooke, ever the heart of the family, focused on the here and now, holding their daughter close, whispering reassurances, and silently vowing to never let her go again. And Taylor, finally facing the consequences of her deception, felt the weight of remorse and the faint glimmer of hope that perhaps, in the fragile aftermath, forgiveness could be possible, though it would not come easily, and trust would take time to rebuild. Outside the mansion, the Los Angeles skyline twinkled like distant stars, indifferent to the emotional upheaval within. But inside, the world had shifted, irrevocably and profoundly. The Lost Daughter's return was more than a reunion. It was a catalyst, forcing each character to confront not only the past but also their present and the fragile possibilities of the future. Secrets had been exposed, love had been tested, and the Forrester legacy had been reshaped by a single undeniable truth. Family was messy, betrayal was inevitable, but connection, true, enduring connection, could survive even the darkest of storms. By the early hours of the morning, a tentative calm settled over the mansion. Ridge and Brooke sat together in the quiet living room, their daughter curled between them on the sofa, exhausted but finally content to be in the presence of those she had always longed for. Taylor lingered at the edge of the room, silent, watching, perhaps reflecting on the magnitude of her actions, and the long road to redemption that lay ahead. And as the first rays of dawn pierced the windows, illuminating the room in a soft golden light, there was a sense, fragile, tentative but undeniable, that despite everything, the Forresters had been given a second chance, a rare gift in a world defined by betrayal, ambition, and relentless drama. Yet even in this fragile calm, the storm was far from over. News would spread. Friends, enemies, and extended family would descend with opinions, judgments, and their own agendas. Media vultures would sense the story, and Los Angeles would buzz with speculation. Every reunion in this family came at a price, and the price of this revelation had only begun to be counted. But for now, in this quiet, luminous moment, Ridge, Brooke, and their daughter allowed themselves a rare, fleeting peace. A moment of family, complete and unbroken, if only for a few hours before the chaos inevitably returned. Morning light filtered through the grand windows of the Forrester mansion, casting a warm glow over the living room where Ridge, Brooke, and their daughter sat in a fragile tableau of reunion. Yet beneath the serenity, tension simmered like an undercurrent, reminding everyone that no Forrester moment of peace could last long. Brooke's hands, still gripping her daughter's, trembled slightly, a mixture of excitement and lingering fear. "I can't believe you're really here," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All these years we never stopped thinking about you, wondering if you were okay. And now you're here." The daughter's eyes glistened, her gaze sweeping between Brooke and Ridge. "I had to see you," she said softly, her voice carrying years of longing, questions, and hope. "I had to know if the love I imagined all these years was real. And now that I'm here, I can feel it. I can feel you both. I've dreamed of this moment more times than I can count." Ridge swallowed hard, emotion choking his words. It's more than I ever imagined," he admitted. We lost so much time. I never thought this day would come. I don't even know how to start making up for it." The warmth of the reunion was electric, but the air grew heavier still when Taylor finally entered the room, closing the door behind her with a soft but deliberate click. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed the turmoil she had long kept hidden. She stepped forward slowly, as though testing the waters, but Ridge's gaze cut through her like a blade. "Taylor," he said sharply, voice low and dangerous, "I don't think I can hear anything you have to say right now. You've kept this from us for decades. How could you?" Taylor swallowed, her composure faltering. I thought I was protecting everyone," she said softly. "I thought if the truth came out too soon, it would destroy the family. I never imagined it would hurt anyone this much." Brooke's eyes narrowed. "Protecting us? Taylor, do you even hear yourself? She spent her entire life without her parents because of your decisions. Every birthday, every milestone gone. You don't get to call that protection." Their daughter, listening to this, felt a surge of anger rise within her. "Protecting them?" she echoed, voice trembling. "Do you know what it's like to grow up believing your parents didn't want you? That your life didn't matter?" She took a step forward, meeting Taylor's gaze with a force that made even Taylor falter. "Do you have any idea what that feels like?" The tension in the room thickened, palpable and suffocating. Ridge ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Taylor," he said firmly, "we need the whole truth. Every detail. No more secrets. No more lies." Taylor nodded reluctantly, taking a deep breath before recounting the convoluted chain of events that had kept their daughter away from them. Her words spilled out hesitantly at first, then with growing intensity, revealing a tapestry of fear, manipulation, and decisions made under duress. She had hoped her silence would shield the Forresters from pain, but instead, it had sown years of confusion and heartbreak. Meanwhile, the daughter absorbed every word, piecing together the story of her life and the decisions that had shaped it. Each revelation hit like a hammer, yet it also provided context, explaining the mysteries and gaps she had carried with her for years. The complexity of Taylor's choices, the fear of consequences, and the tangled web of relationships painted a picture of a world she had been barred from, yet one she now had to navigate. Her emotions shifted rapidly, from anger to sorrow to a cautious understanding, as she realized the full scope of what had happened. Brooke and Ridge tried to comfort her, but the pain of lost years lingered. "We can't change the past," Brooke said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "But we can start now. We can be here for you, and we can build what we should have had all along." Ridge nodded, wrapping an arm around both of them. "We'll figure this out," he said. "Together. No more secrets. No more lies. We have to start over, and it's not going to be easy, but we can do it." Even as they spoke, the mansion seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the gravity of this moment. Outside, the city stirred, oblivious to the emotional earthquake unfolding within these walls. But the Forrester family was acutely aware of the fragility of the moment. Every interaction, every choice, and every word carried the weight of decades of history, betrayal, and longing. The daughter, still absorbing the intensity of the reunion, realized that she would have to navigate not only her own emotions, but also the complex dynamics of a family that had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and endless drama. Taylor, standing at the edge of the room, felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She had tried to shield the Forresters, but in doing so, she had created a chasm that would take years to mend. Her heart ached as she watched Ridge, Brooke, and their daughter, realizing that the bonds of family were far more resilient than she had given them credit for, but that resilience did not erase the consequences of her actions. She had betrayed their trust, and rebuilding it would require more than apologies. It would require time, patience, and proof of her commitment to honesty and transparency. As the hours passed, the family tentatively explored their new reality. Conversations shifted from initial shock to tentative planning, as Ridge and Brooke sought to understand their daughter's experiences and perspective. They learned about the hardships she had endured, the victories she had celebrated alone, and the ways she had survived without them. Each story deepened their appreciation for her resilience, and each shared memory strengthened the fragile threads of connection forming between them. The daughter, in turn, began to recognize the complexity of the adults who had shaped her life. Ridge's stoicism masked deep love and regret. Brooke's warmth concealed years of longing and anxiety. Taylor's duplicity stemmed from fear and misguided protection. Understanding these nuances did not erase the pain of absence, but it provided context, allowing her to approach the family with both caution and hope. By late afternoon, a tentative peace settled over the mansion. The initial storm of emotions had subsided, replaced by a cautious optimism. Ridge, Brooke, and their daughter shared moments of laughter, tears, and reflection, exploring the possibilities of a future together. Taylor, meanwhile, remained a complex presence, her path to redemption still uncertain, but her willingness to face the consequences of her actions marked the first step toward reconciliation. Yet even as the family savored these fragile moments, the larger world loomed with inevitable challenges. Friends, colleagues, and the media would soon learn of the daughter's return, and the Forrester legacy would be scrutinized as never before. Every reunion, every revelation, carried repercussions, and the path forward would require careful navigation. For now, however, Ridge, Brooke, and their daughter embraced the gift of each other's presence, aware that while the past could not be changed, the future remained unwritten, and within their grasp. As night fell over Los Angeles, the mansion was filled with quiet reflection. Ridge sat by the window, glass of scotch in hand, contemplating the twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. Brooke and their daughter prepared for bed, their conversations a mixture of planning, reminiscing, and tentative bonding. Taylor lingered in the background, reflecting on the choices that had led to this reunion, aware that redemption was a long road, but resolved to walk it. And in that quiet, reflective darkness, the Forrester family found the first true sense of connection in decades. The lost daughter had returned, truths had been revealed, and the family had taken the first tentative steps toward healing. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, betrayals, and tests of loyalty. But for this fleeting moment, they allowed themselves to simply be together. The weight of the past, the uncertainty of the future, and the consequences of secrets all hung in the balance. But hope, fragile and enduring, had finally returned to the Forrester mansion.